B. I once met this kid named Tom in my history class back in high school. He was an odd cat, but in a good way, if that makes sense. We became good friends in school, as we both had similar interests and alike friends. This took place in the early 2000s. For context, I'm a female, and while I never saw him romantically or anything, he was cool to hang around with. Well, one day, over summer break, I had invited him over to my house as my parents weren't home. Both my parents were the type to prohibit any boy coming over, so I saw it as an opportunity to hang out. On this day, we both decided to smoke for the first time, as we were getting to that age, if you know what I mean. I had never done it before, but naturally, I was curious. As apparently we'd had health benefit, we both agreed that we'd do it in the woods by my house to not draw any suspicion to us. Because had one of my neighbors saw me doing weed with a guy, my parents would have disowned me. We go into the woods just enough for us not to be seen. I felt weird doing it, but my uncle had always said the famous "you only live once" phrase. And right then, I had decided to do it. At first, it felt strange doing it, but it wasn't that bad. Once the relaxation hit, we sat down by a tree, discussing about what we could do for the summer when both of us get hungry. We were just about to walk down the street to get pizza when I look to my left and see something blue about 20 or so feet away in the wood. I live in Vermont, and most houses here are private property. So when I saw that someone had dumped a container by my house, it was upsetting. Our community works really hard to keep trespassers off property, so that makes it even more of a challenge. Tom and I go over to it and see that it had been sealed several times with duct tape, as if the lid was broken and had to be He starts to make jokes about the possibility of there being a body in there. I give him an unfazed look and begin to inspect the bin, just in case it held belongings. Oftentimes, people would commonly throw their treasures out here. So while it was prohibited, people still did it. Tom proceeded to carry out the bin, which, upon a closer look, turned out to be a cooler. He puts it down and gives me the look, wondering if we should open it. Of course, being the coward I was, I told him I didn't feel comfortable opening it and that he should do it. Tom takes out his knife and proceeds to cut open the duct tape, and hesitated for a few seconds before opening it. What if we do actually find a body? P said my community was very safe with a very low crime rate, if any, and told him that, at best, it was probably someone's dead pet. That seemed to have calmed him down, and he gathers up the courage to open it. All the while, I'm filming the whole ordeal, kind of just laughing and making jokes about the so-called body he would find. If only I had known what would happen next. He opens the cooler and then falls back in horror while closing it. At first, I thought he could have been messing with me, but when he made sure he wasn't, I freaked out myself. Tom begins to violently vomit, telling me to call the police and to not open it. However, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the cooler to see for myself. I obviously can't post the video I shot, but the second I opened it, I was able to get a glimpse of what was inside. There appeared to be something wrapped in a trash bag with this dark reddish ooze leaking from it. I could unsee the entire thing. because the thing was full of maggots to the point of where you could uneven see much of the bag. The smell was unbearable. I think I almost had a heart attack right then. And before even reacting, I was already on the phone with the police. They, along with the FBI, cleared the area with these people in hazmat suits, disinfecting the area we found it in. Tom and I were obviously questioned, but there was ultimately nothing we could say or do other than we had found it. When we asked about what they had found there, they were unable to answer. All they said was, "We can't disclose any information at this time." Now, don't get me wrong, I wanted to believe it was a dog, or maybe a cat. But with all of these authorities around, I had my doubt. It took over a year, but now we finally have some answers. Tom and I had found the remains of a missing woman who disappeared a month prior. However, she wasn't just any woman. She was the mom of her 19-year-old daughter who had ended her life. The reason being because she wouldn't let her see the guy she'd been seeing. Her mom had viewed him as a bad influence, as he apparently made poor life choices and even tried to get her into participating in crime. The daughter was unhappy about this decision, and that resulted in the mother's death. The daughter was found and, of course, arrested after admitting to her involvement. It's a sad story, but this just goes to show you that nowhere is 100% safe. I live up by Cedar Beach in New York with my wife and 2 kids. There's a small lagoon-type area about a 1/4 mile away from our house. It was a nice little spot that not too many people around the area knew about. You'd maybe have about 2 other people there, if any at all. I would commonly take my kids down there to go swimming, up until this past month. That is. Now, I'm never letting my kids or anyone down there again. I haven't told anyone about this, including my wife, fearing I'd be judged for what I saw. But that's just my logic. Last month, my kids had just begun their summer break, and I had taken them to the lagoon to go swimming. Nobody was there, so I felt relieved it would just be us. We set up our chairs in the sand as my wife unpacked lunch for the kids. Aside from the main beach, this was like our own little private beach, if that made sense, a true hidden gem. Me and my wife sat down on our beach chairs, relaxing while our kids were splashing around with their water gun. We always tell them not to go out further because, as nice as this little lagoon was, it was decently deep the further you went. We were there for a few hours that day, nothing too bad. At one point, my wife got tired and went back home to cook dinner. I agreed to watch the kids a little while longer, as they were still having a blast. It had to be around 6:00 p.m. by now, and the sun was starting to set, and that was when I told them it was time to head back. However, they were seemingly too far out to hear me, so I stood up and got closer. Before I could call out to them again, I noticed something oddly strange in the water. The best way I could describe it was a black, roundish object moving in the direction of my kid. I don't know how else to describe it. It was moving, but not in the way you'd think. It was almost as if the water guided it toward the direction of my kid. All I could do was just stare at it as I got closer and closer. I go running into the water, screaming like a madman, telling them to get out of the water and that we had to go. This time, they heard me and came swimming back to shore. They were so confused as to why I was yelling, but I obviously didn't want to scare them, so I really didn't know what to say. By this point, It was almost dark out, and I just told them it was time to go. We grab our beach chairs and start walking over to our neighborhood. That's when I turned around to face the lake, and that's when I saw something that nearly made me sick to my stomach. In the lake was what appeared to be a person sticking out of the water from the torso up. It was too dark to see what they were wearing. I wasn't 100% sure they were looking at us, but I definitely knew it was a person, a woman by the looks of it. I just turned back and sort of tell my kids to keep walking, trying not to panic. We made it home safely, and I have yet to tell my wife. We haven't been back since, and I don't plan on going anytime soon. Years ago, when I was a kid, I attended a summer camp with my brother in Tampa, Florida. It was this small camp held at some sort of educational center with kids around our age. Some younger, some older. The program would only be half the summer, with a big sleepover with all of the staff and campers at the end, along with the end of summer party. Seemed promising, and my parents had put us kids in the program. My parents were both workaholics, and we were not going to be around the house all day, not doing anything. Needless to say, my brother and I had a blast at the summer camp, which said a lot, seeing as neither of us adapted to new environments. Now, let's fast forward to the highlight of the program, the big sleepover. The parents of every camper had to sign off on allowing their kids to sleep over at the camp, as a way of acknowledging that liability purposes. My parents, of course, signed it, allowing my brother and I to attend the sleepover. The camp staff had set up all campers in the gymnasium, and we basically had a whole thing going for us. Everyone laid out their sleeping bags, air mattresses, and chairs, with even some of the counselors setting up their gaming to play on consoles. We had time to do our own thing for a good 2 hours before the head counselor, Mr. Reynolds, gave us the call for lights out, and that we had to get in our sleeping bags. I slept next to my brother because, surprisingly, as fun as the summer camp was, we never actually made any friends. My brother fell asleep relatively fast, and I eventually drifted off to sleep not too long after. Now, this next part is something straight out of a horror movie. I'd say I slept for a good 3 hours or so before I, for some reason, woke up. I took a quick look around the gym and see that everyone was fast asleep, including the staff. That is, until I saw the dark silhouette of a person walking around. He appeared to be cartoonishly tiptoeing around everyone, as if he were trying not to step on anyone or make a sound. While I couldn't see him, he was tall and very lanky, so I knew he couldn't have been one of the campers. But at first, I had assumed it was one of the staff going to use the restroom. But that checked out when I saw him going through camper bags. He did this for a good 5 minutes before walking over to the vending machine area where I could no longer see him. Part of me wanted to believe it was a counselor, but the other part of me wondered if it wasn't. I decided to be ballsy and get out of my sleeping bag and walk over to the vending machine area to see who it actually was. When I turned the corner, I caught him eating a candy bar while holding one of the camper bags. He appeared to be in his early to mid-20s and wore a beanie and jacket. He, of course, spots me as I hear him swear under his breath. I ask him, "Who are you, please?" Takes a second to respond, and with a heavy accent, He says that he was campus security and that he was doing a routine inspection. In other words, he told me that he was making sure everyone was safe. Normally, I would believe something like this, but I could tell something was off. He looked unkempt and didn't even wear anything that resembled a security guard. Keep in mind, I was 12 at the time, so while I was young, I wasn't stupid. Very quietly, he asks where the nearest exit was, and I told him through the main doors, but to be quiet, so that he did and wake anyone up. He walks over to me, pats me on the shoulder, and off he went. I don't even remember thinking twice about it or my suspicions. I just went back to my sleeping bag, thinking that was that, and didn't really think much of it. Fast forward to around 7 or 8 a.m. I was awoke to a bunch of campers and staff in a panic, many of whom were talking about how their stuff had been stolen. There was this one camper whose inhaler was missing, resulting in him having trouble breathing, which led him to the hospital. That kid went into a coma, a damn coma. Others' belongings were also missing, primarily medicine. In fact, it seems the only things that were stolen were either important or valuable. That's when I put 2 and 2 together. That man I had seen last night had to be the one stealing from everyone. That was why he was being so silent. That was why I saw him going through bags. Mr. Reynolds lined everyone up and tried to get the truth out of one of us to figure out what happened. Keep in mind that this was the summer of 2002, so cameras were not around much back then, as they are today. I eventually broke silence and told the counselors that I had saw a man last night ransacking camper bags. I could see the shock on Mr. Reynolds' face after saying that while making sure I wasn't lying. I don't remember much after that, but I do know that police were called, but there was ultimately nothing they could do. The description I gave was anything but useful, as if I'm being honest. I didn't get a good look at him, as I barely spoke to him. Nothing has ever became of the story, and that man I had saw was never caught.